Hello, welcome to Terra Science. Today we have Dr. Krowlikowski from Contra Costa College, and we will talk about regulation. Why is regulation important? Why is it important for consumers? What does it mean for companies who have products that need to be regulated? And what is the general process of regulatory control of different products, and why is it important? So, Dr. Kerry Krowlikowski, welcome to Terra Science.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we are going to talk about regulation in a sense, and please tell us what do you teach a course on regulation, and what is the name of the course?
I teach at Contra Costa College here in Northern California, and we have a course called Safety and Efficacy in Regulated Products, which is called BioSci 182, and we have a non-credit version called 882N, and it's all about regulations that govern, at first glance, like the biopharmaceutical industry. That's the biotech biopharmaceutical industry is kind of the reason our program exists initially, but regulations cover all kinds of companies, all kinds of products in society today. And so we try to have a course that focuses on what people need to learn to work in a regulated industry, starting in the biotech field, but then giving folks tools to think beyond biotech, and what it means to have regulations in society and what they're for and how companies can carry their responsibilities to society.
One of the things that being also in agricultural industry, one of the things that I've come across quite a bit is the shock or a surprise that a company or a manufacturer will get from the kinds of things that they will face from regulatory agencies, and many times those things don't make sense. Like why should I be asking to provide this kind of information? And so I think there seems to be like a little bit of a disconnect between how things are regulated, what kinds of details are required for regulation. Maybe we can take an example of something and describe what it means.
Yeah, sure. There are so many examples in society, and what you say rings totally true to me. I first thought about regulations back when I was in graduate school, thinking about plants, and the big issue of the day was genetically modified plants and what kind of rules we needed to have around them. Then I worked, as a research scientist, and that company really thought a lot about, well, if we have a new product for the agricultural industry, how can we make sure it's compliant so that we can sell it? And that frustration of like, why do we have to do all these things really started to come out. And once I started teaching at the community college and really focused my attention not so much on agriculture, but the biopharmaceutical industry, drug companies, there's a lot more clarity about the intent of regulations, and that's a great starting point for folks to think about. You know, the simplest type of product to think about in terms of regulations that we all understand are medical drugs, something that you might put in your body to try to make you more healthy. You go to the doctor, and the doctor prescribes something, and the doctor knows that this brand is going to work for the sickness that you're being treated for, and you go to the pharmacy, the pharmacist puts it in a little bag, tells you what to do, and everybody feels like, oh, this is going to work. What's in that little bag is the drug it's supposed to be. Somebody has figured out that it works, and all these well-educated people that we know and trust say, hey, put this into your body. But, when you think about it, the doctor didn't make the drug. The
Mhm.
pharmacist did count out the pills and make sure the right one is in your tube, right? But
Right.
the pharmacist didn't make the drugs either anymore, right? Who did? Some big company in some big city, and maybe even in another country. And
Hmm.
so why do we trust so well these things we put in our body, especially when we're sick, right? And so regulations come about sadly, often when a disaster happens. Someone is sold a product that's supposed to make them healthier, they put it in their body, nope, now they're more sick. And so Congress, other legal bodies make rules that say, hey, we never want that to happen again. Let's make some rules to make sure people are safe and that the drug you're taking is effective. And that kind of a story is what generated what we have in the U.S. called the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. But that's just one example of society thinking, I want to trust what I'm buying. I want to be assured that things are safe. And, as individuals, how can we tell whether this little white pill is safe and what it's supposed to be? Somebody else has to take care of that for us. And so that regulations is sort of having societal expertise help keep us
Mhm.
safe, is how I think about it.
Yeah, it's really a triangle with very um, strong angles. Because if we look from the consumer side, it's the safety issue, and it's one is safety issue, and the other issue is the product. Is it actually delivering what it promises to deliver? That's from the consumer side. We look from the manufacturer side. They've already done, as far as they're concerned, everything. That they've come up with some innovative product they want to get out of the market, out into market. They've spent a lot of money. Now they want returns. I mean, there's so many things that the manufacturer can't wait to get the product out. But when we look from the third angle, which is the regulatory arm, now let's say FDA or agricultural in California, let's say CDFA, what a crazy landscape! How do you regulate so many different products with just a minimum amount of time? And it's a very hard question. So even with drugs, you can regulate, like, okay, a standardization of this is what should be in this kind of product and this kind of product. But then there is innovation, and standardization doesn't match the innovation, because innovation means now it's different. So it is a very difficult area. And one of the good examples was really through COVID, wasn't it, when the RNA
Mm-hmm.
vaccine
Yeah.
was. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about describe that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I'm no expert on the COVID vaccine. I'll say that. But, in our class, we definitely do dig into specific examples. And you're right, it does make it a lot more easy to talk about. And so, usually vaccines for different diseases and even pandemics have basically been protein based in the past, or a dead virus. Many of us know that. And so, to be inoculated against the disease, you get injected with a piece of the infecting agent. Well, that's fine, and there were COVID vaccines that were developed around that model. But then there was this new type of vaccine that had really never been tried before, and most of us have heard of it, the mRNA vaccine
Mhm.
from Moderna, Pfizer, and BioNT. I'm forgetting all the companies. But this was a totally different way of manufacturing a virus. And so here the world was having death and, economic horrors going on, and not to mention the emotional and mental stress that it was taking on everybody. We really wanted something that was going to keep us safe really fast. And so it's a tricky situation, right? You want this magical vaccine like we see in the movies, they virus, and then, 3 hours later in the movie, oh, they're starting to cure people. Well, that's not reality. But people, that excitement to try to get things done fast really um, was true during COVID, right? We all lived through that. And so there was this great new type of vaccine um, that had great potential, but how did we tell as society that it was going to work? And so
Right.
we had to have clinical trials, and they went
Mhm.
really fast. They were much faster than usual. That's where you experiment on people to see if the thing works. And people volunteered to be part of the clinical trials. They got preliminary data. They moved through those fast and said, this doesn't seem to be hurting the people that volunteered for the trial. This does seem to be protecting people from the virus. And so they mass produced it and deployed it. We remember those huge
Yeah.
vaccination
Mhm.
centers, and but one thing about that is that until you do the test as a scientist, until you test things a lot, you can't know for sure that nothing bad will happen. And so as the COVID vaccine got distributed to more and more and more people, we did get more information back about potential side effects. And that is part of clinical trials that goes on beyond when a drug is deemed safe and effective. They're still monitoring for all drugs um, to make sure that things are safe, even innovative things. And that's a balance that our country, the FDA particularly, but all the regulatory agencies try to strike, is to figure out, well, how can we move innovation along quickly, but also monitor for safety and put the brakes on something if it's not safe. And one thing that I like to remember in all of this is regulations are just humans trying to make the world safe, right?
Yeah,
And so,
that's a good
when we
point.
think of the regulatory agencies, people
Hmm.
did their best to write down on pieces of paper and make little laws that said, here's our best way of ensuring that the company's doing what it's supposed to do. And, the people who are the regulators are doing their best, and sometimes what they say doesn't quite mesh with what the company is understanding. But it's just, we're all just people trying to make a safe and awesome product. And that's good
Yeah,
to remember
no,
as you try to
that's a
comply.
that's bringing it down to at a human level, that regulators are also humans. but I think the two other types of regulatory processes that I like to quickly touch upon
Mm-hmm.
is in the food industry,
Yeah.
and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about class one or class A
Sure.
substances, or psychedelics or drugs.
Mm-hmm.
First, if we talk about the food industry, in the food industry there are multiple aspects. There's food production, which also goes into EPA territory, and just regulating what kind of products we are putting on our
Yep.
farms, what we're putting on the soil, or even in animal food production, growth hormones. There are all of
Yep.
these other things, and there are many products, and the growers, or people who are growing our food, they're looking for products because they want to enhance their production, and their manufacturers come up with new products almost every day. There are so many new products. So we can almost imagine this kind of like a bottleneck of that. All of this has to be regulated in some way, I mean, such a broad spectrum. So one thing, I've been to meetings lately as well, and one thing that the regulatory branches do is to start to categorize these products into
Yeah.
different categories, so that then we can put these products into this bucket or this bucket, and then it makes it a little bit easier to look at them in that
Mm-hmm.
specific category. And if you look in agriculture, there's also not just fertilizers, there's pesticides, there's
Yep.
and then fertilizers, as we know, are applied and then they help to grow the food. But then there are pesticides that may be on the product, on the fruit,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that is now being consumed.
Yeah.
So these are really really tough aspects. So when you have this class 182 at Contra Costa College, can you tell us, like, what do you tell your students? Are you preparing them for these three, because they could be just be consumers, they could go become manufacturers, they could, maybe one of them will join the regulatory agency.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for that. And when I first had this job, I've been doing this job for 18 years. I knew that I had to teach about this topic. And the standard way was to just sort of march through the history of the FDA and focus on the rules and the Code of Federal Regulations that govern the biopharmaceutical industry. And that always just seemed to me like, if someone's training to be either a manager or a worker, people hate just being told what to do and not really understand the reason behind it or have any power, right? That if you're told to work in a regulated environment and follow all these rules, well, you're going to do it so you don't get fired. But if that's it, it's hard to stay following the rules, right?
Mhm.
But when you understand the human side of things and the intent behind the regulations and think about, oh, how can I help my product be safe, be effective? How can I be a good member of society? It really, I think, helps everybody comply with regulations with less effort. And so in our class, I ask, we sort of go through these 8 questions about a number of different industries. And what I try to do is help everybody understand that you can think about the reasons behind these regulations.
Mhm.
And we have big discussions about, is this enough? If you're the consumer, is this safe enough? Or if you're working in an industry, and we could talk about one of these newer industries like the cannabis industry or the Schedule One, perhaps legalized industry. Um, what would we need to do to make sure that the consumers feel safe? And so we think about different things that are regulated, biopharmaceuticals, cannabis industry, food. Nutritional supplements are very exciting to talk
Mhm.
about. They're kind of an exciting market that most of us are familiar with. Genetic testing, diagnostic testing, it's not just the drugs we take, but the things that diagnose us are really important. And then we actually do think about, because we've developed an ability to think about, well, what kind of rules exist? Why do they exist? How does somebody check that someone's following the rules? What's going to happen to you if you're not following the rules? We think ahead to new industries, so cannabis and Schedule One substances, and maybe the legalization of things like psychedelics. Well, how should it be? It gives us an opportunity to use our own critical thinking and humanity to really dig in to what it means to be regulated. And I think students come out of this experience in BioSci 182 really feeling like they could comply with any type of regulation.
Mhm.
Whatever job you're going to have, whatever product, there's going to be details you have to learn right then and there. But if you have a big sense of the importance of regulations and the fallibility of them, it really helps people do good work in all of that triangle you were talking about: the companies, the workers, the
Yeah.
regulators, and society. Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be like more education in that area, because that will make the whole process a bit smoother. Because once we start to think about why regulation is required, and then how the process of regulation, what are those steps, then it becomes easier for companies to follow it, as well as consumers, and then students need to be trained in this. As we know that there are people who are trained in this regulation process, and whenever we needed any help with regulation, we have to hire them. So there are actually
Mm,
students who can probably take that path to
yeah.
become those facilitators of for regulation. So yeah, before we finish, I think it's good to just touch upon Schedule One, because that's a whole another area which is coming in. And it's an interesting one, because many of the drugs, or even we call them drugs, but if you think about cannabis, it's not really at a level where we can maybe call it a drug. It's consumed as leaves, or that we say marijuana. But as we know, in California it was legalized, but not at the state level. So then we sorry, no,
Or
not at
not the
the
national level.
national level.
Yeah.
So now we have another interesting aspect of regulation, where the state says, if you live in California, you can have this much, or there is all these. But then not at the national level. Completely two different levels of regulation. And other states may follow. But the underlying question, I think, in under all of these regulation of cannabis, and also maybe class one drugs, MDMA, or some of the things that are being tested for mental health and PTSD, they're becoming important in that sense. For many decades, they were thought of not good for society, and so the regulation was, in a way, the idea of regulating them was to protect,
Yeah.
was for protection, and for to make sure that they were safe.
Yeah.
But now the transition is to understand that maybe some of these things are safe, but maybe not as much important as recreational, but maybe even more pharmaceutical. So the I think the real heart of the question is, how does regulatory agency change its mind? What
Yeah.
is that process? And how do you prepare your students for that regulation is one thing, but regulation is also dynamic in
Yeah.
one sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's we do explore the current regulators of Schedule One substances, which is the Drug Enforcement Agency. So a whole other, right? We
Right.
think of that as more of a criminal justice agency, but we do delve into that, and then think about, well, what could it mean? Now people have done small clinical trials to think about applications of things like MDMA and other substances like that. In our class, we do think about, well, what sort of evidence would we as society? I mean, that's the main thing we do in class, is think of ourselves as society first. well, what would it look like if this particular substance were legalized? What sort of understanding of how it worked and how safe it is would be useful for consumers to know directly? And then what maybe behind the scenes is important. Back to my original description, the people producing these products, how do we trust that they are what they're supposed to be? And
Right.
yeah, and so I think thinking about how, people also bring up how much someone should just be allowed to put whatever they want in their body, right? We are
Right.
free people. And
Mhm.
so how to balance sort of a societal harm if a lot of people are taking something that's unsafe and not knowing it versus the freedom people have to do what they want with their bodies. I think this class helps people critically think about some things that they might have done mindlessly in the
Yeah.
past. Like those nutritional supplements are great. They're very weakly regulated. There are a lot of claims that probably aren't true on lots of
Yeah.
products.
Yeah.
And so really starting to think about, oh, why do I believe this?
Mhm.
And helping people be a little more empowered, I think is an important part of this class. And once you're empowered as an individual, then you can take that to your job. And, we work at companies as part of society, and everyone wants to do well in the world and not hurt other people. So I think learning how one interacts with regulations in your private life really helps you think about how to be a better worker in your public life.
Yeah, and I think the key word is really claims, like you said, and that's where the regulatory agencies focus a lot on claims.
Yeah, yeah,
Across the board, whether it's pharmaceuticals, agriculture, or even psychedelics or class one substances, it's about claims. It's
yeah,
about some manufacturer claiming that this is going to do this, and but then those are fine prints, like you were saying, and in the on the TV we can hear all these commercials from drug companies. This will going to do this, but it may, there's like 20 other illnesses and harms it can cause you, spoken quickly. So like you're saying, so then the consumer has to figure out, but then also consumption is the
yeah,
other thing. So it's interesting that how we then move from regulation to drug enforcement and criminal
mm-hmm,
justice. It's like a transition
yeah,
where overuse of something can cause harm.
yeah,
So it's a very interesting landscape, but it is interesting that all these things exist out there, right? When
mm-hmm,
people get sick, there are drugs or there are medicine they can take,
yeah,
and opioids is a good
yeah,
example as well,
mm-hmm,
right? Which helped a lot in relieving pain, and but then we figured out that, well, they're addictive, and it's gone into a completely different direction.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean that in itself shows the importance of regulation.
yeah.
All of this. So well, I'm so glad that you are teaching this course. Would you like to tell us how students can sign up, register, and what's the process? And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, sure, thanks. And when I first had to teach a course like this, I was really a little bored by the idea. But now that I've developed this course that touches on so many topics and helps empower students, I really love teaching this course now. So I encourage folks to really consider signing up for it. It's a great discussion, and everybody brings so much to the table. So it's called Biosci 182. It'll start at the end of January 2025. It's completely online. And it goes from January to May. And you can sign up by, I'm hoping y'all will put the website link to this podcast. You enroll as a student at Contra Costa College and then enroll for this class. And if you take the 182 version, you can get college credit, and it'll cost, if you're a California resident, it'll cost something like $85 for the 2 units. If you are not a California resident, it will be much more expensive. However, we have a non-credit version of this class, which goes on a non-credit transcript, and it's free. It's the same class. Everyone's in the class together. The non-credit people, I hope, will participate and stay up with the work and the discussion. But it's a really great option for people all around the world to participate in this class. And again, come to our website, and I'll help you get enrolled in the college and signed up for the class.
That's great. So anyone can
Yeah.
can enroll. That's fantastic. Well, it sounds like a really important class, not only for students but also I think people who may just want to learn more about regulation. So, I mean, not only for people looking for careers in this path, but also to
Oh
learn
yeah.
about regulation. Yeah. So,
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
yeah,
I'm learning a lot myself as I produce the class.
yeah, no, that's fantastic. So it's an online class, and
Yep.
so the whole process is online.
Yep.
So are there? Is it like asynchronous? So people just take it
Yeah,
at their own
there
pace,
actually
right?
aren't meeting times. We do have, milestones that you want to meet every week and deadlines because we do interact with each other. And so we have to be accountable for our discussions. But yeah, every week there's new information and a new way of interacting with that information. And it goes over 16 weeks.
Okay. Wow. Well, sounds good. I think I might sign up for it myself. It sounds like a
Great to
good
have you
course.
in there.
Well, thank you, Dr. Krowlikowski. This was really good to discuss the landscape of regulation, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on that. And we look forward to having you back on in the near future.
All right,
Thank
thanks so
you for
much.
coming to Terra Science. Well, if you listen to this podcast, I hope you start thinking about regulation because it does touch everyone in one way or another. And so, thanks for joining. And if you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.
The beauty of our environment and the uniqueness of our planet, of course, but also the people I've met and the fact that people do want to play a stewardship role. They do. I haven't heard someone say, no, I want to pollute the planet. It's kind of like the tragedy of the commons takes over. And so I see a lot of potential to change the course with the kind of information that we're generating.